Yes, I was wanting to ask about this idea of personhood, because it is so interesting, isn't it? And I'm sure it isn't the one around which I think your thinking turns as well. You know, is that given the thinking in the university here recently about the idea of because you can't define personhood or the moment in which it arises, it's therefore perfectly licit to abort a child or kill a child after birth, which they call post-birth abortion. Would you also hold with that kind of thinking because of the doubt around when personhood arises?
I think it's a completely ludicrous concept, because to carry out an abortion is to end a pregnancy, it's to bring about a miscarriage. So clearly when you have a baby that's born, you cannot possibly carry out abortion. You're talking about infanticide, which I think is a completely different issue.
Yes.
What we're talking about here, what I think I'm talking about, is a situation where you have a woman who is pregnant and is making a decision about the future of her pregnancy and about the fetus, the child will be that she is carrying at that particular moment, which is why the agency of the woman, the opinions of the woman, the sense of what that woman is and what she wishes to do with her life is so completely vital and central to it.
So it seems that you are very much emphasising the autonomy and the right of the woman to make her own decision. And I'd like to ask something about what happens, in your opinion, when we centralise autonomy and calibrate our whole moral system around the idea of one person's choice. Does that not automatically, seeing as we're having a discussion about rights, put other people's rights in danger? Because does that not return the ethic of the person in power? Obviously has the autonomy. They can, if they have the autonomy, I mean they have the power to make the decision, but the less powerful person is the unborn child, or indeed the husband who isn't allowed to have a say, or whatever. Surely this is a danger to rights in throwing autonomy at the heart of every moral decision to do with abortion.
Well, I think that with this, it would be difficult to just kind of generalise from the point that's being made here, because in exactly the same way that you would, I think, argue that for you life is sacrosanct and there can be no stepping back from that, for me the idea that you can use someone's body for something that they don't wish it to be used for is sacrosanct, and I don't think that I can step back from that. And I do think that when it comes to these particular personal decisions that relate to our very own selves, we can of course acknowledge that other people can have opinions, but at the end of the day, there is something about your own body which really does make it yours and no one else's. And I think that the idea that in pregnancy, women are pitched against their partners and pitched against their families is completely wrong. Of course what happens during a pregnancy is that people come to their decisions as part of a discussion with other people in their lives, and typically the women that we see in our clinics are accompanied to them by their partners who honestly believe that ending that pregnancy is the very best thing for them and their families. And it seems to me quite bizarre that you or anyone else would want to step between them and that decision.
Thank you. So now it'll be your turn to ask 2 questions following the same format as before.
Well, what does make you feel that you have the right to step between that particular woman and her decision about what is morally right for her at that time, taking into account that when a woman requests an abortion, requests that her pregnancy is ended, she doesn't do so to make an abstract decision. Very often women will say, in general, I'm not a great fan of abortion, but in my particular circumstances, it is the right thing for me to do now. Why should you be able to intervene in that?
I think firstly that from an experience of meeting women who do have that issue and are not so clear and are not so uninfluenced by other people and by friends, as I said, And what I've found through speaking to women who are in that situation is that often just the simple question, do you actually need some practical help, will turn that situation around. In fact, a friend of mine was chatting to a girl who was thinking of going in for an abortion, and all the girl was saying, far from being absolutely convinced that this was the right thing for her, she was just like, oh no, I'm just about to get married, my mum's going to kill me. And having had a chat, just with my friend on the pavement, she realised that of course she could go and talk to her mum, and it would be fine. And indeed, my friend got invited to her wedding, and indeed the baby was born. And so this idea of standing between a person and the decision that's right for them is a bit of a caricature of what's actually happening. And I would definitely encourage people to read some of the stories in Abby Johnson's book Unplanned, because she worked for 8 years believing exactly what you believe, that she was doing the best for women. And she even watched situations where a woman was going into her own abortion clinic, and she was expecting twins, and the mother of the girl that was going in was crying out, please, please don't do this, I will bring up the children, it's going to be fine. And the girl was unmoved by these pleas, but Abby was very touched by them. So the truth is that life is more complicated. Families are sometimes pitched against each other. Things are extremely painful. And the fact is that women often find themselves going in for abortions because other people want them. And the heart-rending stories in And Still They Weep are my motivation, because it's not just babies that are lost, it's women's lives and men's lives that are so often ruined. And just to have a Google around men hurt by abortion will also provide for me motivation to make sure that people aren't being hoodwinked into thinking that this is an easier decision than it in fact is.
Thank you. Follow-up question?
Yeah, what do you think about those women who haven't been hoodwinked into that decision and who have thoroughly considered all of the options? Those women who, I would say that, well, I know that around 15% of the women who come to be passed for counselling decide that they'll continue with their pregnancy. They fit entirely into the circumstances that you're saying. There are some women who will require practical help and can be given those practical help. But what I'm asking you about are those women who genuinely feel that when the options are placed in front of them, it is their decision to make. Do you accept that it is their decision to make?
I accept that they're making a decision, but I'm not sure whether morally, ethically, and according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it really is morally their decision, because of the fact that they are, at that moment, a mother already, and that motherhood and childhood have special protection, and that if they were living in a culture that honoured the reality of motherhood, the seriousness of sexual life. Most societies, it was once pointed out to me, prior to our own, described sex by means of some kind of range of gods and goddesses. It was a sacred thing. Mircea Eliade's fascinating book, The Sacred and the Profane. And I think that the reason why I would say that people have limited horizons on their own freedom today is that we have limited our own horizons in considering the nature of our sexual lives. Again, reductionism has been at work, so that when they're considering that decision, they're deciding within a very limited framework. They're saying, my body, my choice, but they're not talking about my body, our baby, whose choice? And there's a larger picture at work there, and so that's why I feel that when there's a cultural shift taking place, by which we now have had, since the Abortion Act around the world came in, 45 million abortions, that becomes a bigger question than does it feel right for me? Because possibly the time for that question was when sexual life was embarked upon.